The Vikings was a very interesting year. I don't think many people thought they were going to do very well as they brought in Sam Darnold as their quarterback. That was the next Kirk Cousins, their replacement for Kirk Cousins. And I think people looked at what Sam Darnold has done in his career and didn't really think highly of them. And then they go in and win 14 games and nearly win the NFC North. But then Sam Darnold leaves, gets a big contract from Seattle, and now they have their second-year quarterback, or technically rookie quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, who they drafted 2 years ago out of the first round, who suffered a season-ending injury in the preseason and didn't get to play at all his rookie year. And now he is in his technical rookie year, and it feels like the Vikings are back to where they were last year. They have a good team, but the quarterback position is a bit questionable, and not many people know how it's going to go for the quarterback and for J.J. McCarthy. And again, last year, they proved many people wrong. We'll see what they can do this year. This is the 2025 season preview for the Minnesota Vikings. Let's get into the video. So first, looking at the additions and losses that the Vikings made, I think most notably the biggest, I think overall, real quick, they had a very good offseason. I liked what the Vikings did. But mainly the O-line. Because last year, they had one of the worst O-lines, at least in terms of sacks allowed. I think they allowed the fourth or tied fourth most sacks in the league. And they go ahead and spend a lot of resources, big money, high draft picks on their O-line. First, they bring in Donovan Jackson, first-round pick from Ohio State, national championship team. Good pick in my opinion. Then they spend big money on two former Colts linemen, Will Fries and Ryan Kelly, both one of the better linemen at their respective positions. Kelly center, Fries guard. And bringing those three O linemen in is huge, mainly because the linemen that they lost, Cam Robinson, Ed Ingram, and Dalton Reisner, their O-line gave up the tied fourth most sacks in the league. And it's probably for a reason. Oh, and Garrett Bradbury. Garrett Bradbury's been a long-term Viking. They traded for Cam Robinson at the deadline, so who knows about him. But when you lose Darrisaw to injury, and when you have all these linemen that helped allow the fourth most sacks, and you get rid of all four of them, you bring Darrisaw back from injury, and you also bring in these three linemen in Jackson, Fries, and Kelly, I think it's one of the biggest O-line turnarounds in the league. They didn't really need to invest much on the other positions, and if you're going to help your rookie quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, technically rookie quarterback, no better way to do that than spend big money and a first-round draft pick on the O-line. So I love those moves. Now, another one of the big losses is obviously Sam Darnold. Up and down career, and then he goes to Minnesota, gets put on a great supporting cast, and at the beginning of the season, he was looking like an MVP candidate, and then he ended up overall just having a really good year for the Vikings. Unfortunately, it didn't end very well, especially in the playoffs. But you saw that if you have a quarterback that can run this Vikings offense and just get the ball to its good players, you can have success, especially with how good the Vikings defense is. And we saw that in Sam Darnold. And now you have McCarthy, who we'll get into J.J. McCarthy in a little bit. Continuing to go off of the additions they made. They bring in Rondale Moore. Has not been necessarily the best start to his career in Arizona, but maybe a fresh start on Minnesota can help him out. Jordan Mason, I think, is a very good pickup. Very good backup running back. Probably a better backup running back than Cam Akers. I didn't put him as one of the losses they had, but they lose Cam Akers, who was their backup to Aaron Jones last year. At least some point in the season he was. He only played 12 games for them. And now they bring in Jordan Mason, formerly the backup in San Francisco, is now their backup here. And I actually really like this pickup. And I don't think he's just a backup. I think he'll actually get a good amount of opportunities on the Vikings. Aaron Jones is on the older side. He still had a great year last year. Jones did. But I think Mason, if you're going to give your second running back a good amount of reps, I'd rather it be Jordan Mason than Cam Akers. So I really like that pickup. Then they lose edge rusher Pat Jones. Pat Jones is a fine player. He did get 7 sacks last year, but he didn't generate a ton of pressures overall. So whether it was a product of being on a good defensive line, who knows? So it's kind of hard to tell how good of a player Patrick Jones is. You don't get 7 sacks and be a bad player. So I don't think he's a bad player by any means. But again, not having a ton of pressures doesn't really help. It doesn't really help promote your 7 sack season that he had last year. So he's a fine player, but I definitely don't think it's like this crazy loss that the Vikings had losing Pat Jones. And another big area they improved is the D-line, the interior of the D-line. So last year, two of the guys that played a lot for them on that interior D-line was Jonathan Bullard and Jerry Tillery. Those guys are gone. They were okay to find veteran D-linemen, right? Nothing that's going to blow you out of the water, but they're not like the worst players in the world. But then they go and spend another set of big money on 2 interior D-line, Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. Jonathan Allen is a very good pass rushing D lineman. He was a Pro Bowl in his last healthy season, which was 2023. So he was injured in 2024, but when he was healthy, he made the Pro Bowl. And I mean, going off what we said with Pat Jones, he may not have high pressure numbers, but he will get sacks, and he'll also not miss too many tackles either. So he'll put up good stats, and he's your second D tackle because you have Jonathan Allen. Who they also brought in from Washington. He's a very good pass rusher, similar to Jonathan Hargrave, and he has been a 2-time Pro Bowler. While his numbers have slightly dropped because he's getting up there in age, he's still very good. Like, he's still easy top 20 D tackle in football, maybe even a top 15 D tackle in football. So to go from 2 bottom tier D tackles that are just like rotational, like veteran guys in Bullard and Tillery to going to 2 borderline top 20 D tackles in all of football, I think that's a win if you're the Vikings. Now, all that being said, the great additions they made on the O-line, getting an upgrade at backup running back, bringing in 2 very good D tackles, they did take a hit in their secondary. They lose Stephon Gilmore, they lose Cam Bynum, and they replace them with Isaiah Rodgers and Jeff Okudah. Now, Stephon Gilmore, honestly, despite being 34 years old, was pretty decent to pretty solid last year for the Vikings. He's been on a number of teams over the last few or so years, but he's been productive despite being up there in age. And then they lose Karen Bynum, a very versatile safety. He obviously is much better as a free safety, deep coverage safety type of guy, but he had his best seasons in his last 2 years of Minnesota. He had a good year in coverage last year, 3 interceptions. Also had all those great touchdown celebrations too, or turnover celebrations. And he is 27 years old, so that is an unfortunate loss for the Vikings to lose a guy like Cam Bynum. But I think they had to pay him or Byron Murphy, and they chose Byron Murphy. And I think they can handle the loss of Cam Bynum because of the other safeties that they have, which of course we'll get into later when we talk about the defense. But the guys they brought in to replace Stephon Gilmore at the corner position, you bring in Jeff Okudah. Not the best start to his career either, similar a little bit to Rondale Moore. But maybe being in a great defensive system that really maximizes their players and puts them in the right places, maybe a fresh start as well, could help him. I think it could help other players that they added, like Rondale Moore mainly. But I don't know how confident I am in the Jeff Okudah pickup. And I think looking at the depth chart that I normally use on ourlads.com, it's just a website I get the depth charts from. He was, I think, one of their 3 starting corners, and I don't know how I feel about that. They also bring in Isaiah Rodgers, who didn't really play a ton in Philly. He played under 40% of the snaps. But considering his minimal amount of snaps he had, he was a pretty solid corner for Philly, solid in the run game, solid in the pass game, so I do like that pickup. I don't know if he's better than Stephon Gilmore. I think they're very similar. So I think overall it was a pretty good offseason. Massive upgrade on the line in the defensive and the offensive line. That's the most important part anyway, so that's great. You bring in a really good backup running back that can be maybe even a 1A, 1B type of running back in Jordan Mason. And then you kind of just swap Rodgers for Gilmore and then bring in a guy like Jeff Okudah and then obviously lose Cam Bynum. But again, I think they can recover from the Cam Bynum loss with the safeties they have. But before we get to the safeties and the Minnesota Vikings defense, we have to look at their offense. Now, this offense last year with Sam Darnold was the 9th scoring offense in the league. Pretty good. But again, now you have a technical rookie quarterback So it's tough to know how they'll play because they either since they're in a good situation, McCarthy could either play like have a Jaden Daniels Stroud type rookie season, or he can struggle. We don't know. I do think he'll have a relatively solid season because of the supporting cast. The supporting cast is so important when it comes to these quarterbacks. I feel like every quarterback rookie season it lines up with their supporting cast for the most part. So I do think McCarthy will have a solid season, but again, it's still to be determined. Because the thing is, at Michigan, he had such a good team around him, and basically his role in the offense was just to distribute the ball to his good players, run the system well, and not really make mistakes, and hand the ball off to Blake Corn. And Minnesota, he's literally asked to do the same exact thing. He has a good team around him, and his role is just to execute the offense and get the ball into the playmakers' hands, and they have a lot of those. So I have confidence that McCarthy can execute the system in Minnesota well for a rookie and put them in position to win games. Again, we talked about the O-line last year, tied fourth most sacks, but it's massively improved. Donovan Jackson, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, Darrisaw is now healthy. He's one of the better tackles in the league. And Brian O'Neill was actually very good last year too. He's probably, outside of Donovan Jackson because he's a rookie, he's probably the quote-unquote weak link of the O-line, and he's really good. And he was very good last year. So they go from an O-line that was not very good last year to potentially a top 3 offensive line in the league. So massively improved there. Perfect for J.J. McCarthy. The running backs. You have Aaron Jones, who last year was very good. Almost 1,200 yards, 5 touchdowns. He also gave you 402 in the receiving game. And again, he is 30 years old. He might be 31 by now, but he was 30 last season. And you like what you have with him. And again, Jordan Mason's a very good backup running back, if not a guy that could actually, like, I don't know, maybe Aaron Jones gets 60% of the carries or like 55% of the carries, and Jordan Mason gets like 45% of the carries, something like that, or 40% of the carries. I think Jordan Mason can find himself a good role on this team and be effective with it. And you also got C.J. Ham, one of the few fullbacks left in the league, but I like C.J. Ham, and one of the better fullbacks in the league. Then at the receiver position, I mean, some of these guys you don't really need to talk much about, mainly Justin Jefferson. We all know Justin Jefferson. You either have him as the best receiver in the league, you either have him as the second best receiver in the league, and that's pretty much it. If you have him outside of that, you're probably not right. But just based on what we've seen from Justin Jefferson, so there's not much to talk about with him. You know how good he is. We all know how good he is. I'm confident McCarthy can get him the ball. Now, your receiver 2 is another very good receiver. One of the better receiver 2s in the league. I think if he was the receiver 1 on an offense, he could be really good. But he's not because Justin Jefferson's there. And Jordan Addison is very good. Last year, he had himself 800 yards and 9 touchdowns. Now, he will be missing 3 games from a suspension. So he won't be on the team for the first 3 games, which I think is big because not only is that McCarthy's first 3 starts in an NFL game, but that likely means they're going to throw Ty Felton out there potentially, or Lucky Jackson as that second outside receiver alongside Justin Jefferson. Because Rondell Moore's more of a slot guy. Jalen Naylor, more of a slot guy. So you need that second guy in those 3 games. And you have Lucky Jackson. You have Ty Felton, who they took in the 3rd. Now, Ty Felton, he's a very tall, more slender build receiver. He is fast, too. Doesn't really have the physicality to, deal with, press and stuff. But he can get a lot of chunk plays downfield. Now, he may not be the friendliest guy for a rookie in McCarthy, but I think he can make some plays in those first 3 games if he is needed, which I think he will be because Addison won't be there. And then in that slot position, again, you got Rondell Moore, who hasn't done a ton to start his career in Arizona. Hence why he's not on Arizona. But he's still a solid player. He still can be a decent player, especially again in a new system with a very good coach in Kevin O'Connell. But then your starting slot receiver, Jalen Naylor, had himself a fine season. Had himself actually a pretty solid season last year. He had 400 yards, 6 touchdowns. Was pretty reliable in terms of catching the ball. He did have 4 drops last year, but for 42 targets to drop 4 passes, that's not that bad. So Jalen Naylor was pretty solid as a slot guy. And when Jordan Addison is back on the field after the first 3 weeks, you're really happy with your 3 receivers there, but it might be a little up and down, a little shaky in those 3 games without Jordan Addison. But overall, great receivers. And then lastly, we haven't talked about the tight ends. TJ Hawkinson, when healthy, is one of the better tight ends in the league, I still think. Again, he's got to get healthy consistently, but when he is healthy, very good. He didn't get in the end zone last year, but he had 400 yards. But again, he only played 10 games. So I think when Hawkinson's healthy, he's for sure a top 15 tight end, maybe even easily a top 10 tight end. And then Josh Oliver, who had to step in for when Hawkinson wasn't playing or just wasn't fully healthy, had himself 300 yards and 3 touchdowns last year. So that's a good 1-2 punch there at tight end. Again, it's a very good surrounding supporting cast around J.J. McCarthy, which is why I think he will have success. Again, he may not have the most crazy plays, but I think he's just going to execute the offense well and get the ball to the good players, which I think is all he'll be asked to do. And I think that will result in him having a pretty decent rookie year here in Minnesota. But unlike a Sam Darnold, I think he has that higher potential to be even more than that. Now, going to the defense. So defense last year in Minnesota was a top 5 defense in scoring. They allowed the 5th fewest points of any defense last year. And when you look at, I think they had, or no, they didn't. They had a lot of sacks too. They got a lot of turnovers. Again, it was overall just a very good defense. And starting off with the D-line, again, we talked about the 2 big improvements they made on the D-line, bringing Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, 2 top 20 interior D linemen in all of football. But then you also have Harrison Phillips, who as your 3rd string D lineman or 3rd best D lineman / your starting nose tackle, he's a good run defender. Again, Allen and Hargrave are more pass rushing interior D linemen. So to have a guy like Harrison Phillips, who is more of a run defender, is a perfect fit. Again, his numbers were slightly down in 2024 compared to his 2023 season. But again, he can still be very good. He can still be a good run defender on a very good Minnesota D-line. And if he can play, again, like he did in 2023, this season, he'll be perfect next to Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. And then your 2 outside linebacker pass rushers that you have is probably some of the best in the league. You have Jonathan Grenard, who was, again, one of the better edge rushers last year. He had a great 2023 in Houston, and then comes over to Minnesota last offseason and picks up right where he left off. Was amongst the best at pressuring the quarterback. Hurries, he got a ton of hurries. He also forced 4 fumbles and just overall had a ton of sacks. I don't remember quickly checking how many sacks he had. He had 12 sacks last year, so great season out of Jonathan Grenard. And then to pair alongside him, you have Andrew Van Ginkel, who also had a great first year with Minnesota, 11.5 sacks. He was 7th in Defensive Player of the Year voting, 2 interceptions, and also nearly had 80 tackles. He's a very good all-around outside linebacker, pass rusher, whatever. He's not your typical edge rushing outside linebacker. He can definitely play off the ball and as a pass rusher or edge rusher as well. So him and Grenard, very good along that very good interior D-line. And then, one guy I want to talk about before we go to the linebackers is Dallas Turner. Didn't play a ton in his rookie year because it's a really crowded edge rush room and also really good, mainly with Ginkel and Grenard. So he didn't play a ton, but in 16 games where he only played under 30% of the snaps in those games, he had 3 sacks, had an interception, got 20 tackles, only missed 1 tackle, and for a rookie that was in a limited year in terms of reps, he got a decent amount of pressures, I'd say. So I think despite not playing a ton, I think Dallas Turner showed a lot, and I think he definitely can be a good pass rush edge rusher in this league, probably as a replacement to Van Ginkel, because I think Renard is a long-term cornerstone on this team, but I think he can be your next your Van Ginkel replacement. Now, he doesn't have that versatility that Van Ginkel has, but I think he has a lot more edge rushing upside than Van Ginkel. Then looking at the linebackers, another great room. The duo of Blake Cashman and Ivan Pace is very good. Blake Cashman in his first year with Minnesota had his best year as a run defender, as a tackler, still got a good amount of pressures and sacks. He also can be pretty solid in coverage as well. And I think another year in the Minnesota system, because it was his first year last year, I think another year in this system is just going to be beneficial for Cashman. I think he's going to have an even better year 2 as a Viking. And then next to him, you got Ivan Pace Jr., who, while isn't the best in coverage, he is very good in the run. Very good run defender. And also can get at the quarterback pretty well, too. Like, get some pressure, get some sacks on the QB. Had 100-plus tackles in 2023 when he was last fully healthy. And he's only 2 years in his career, with tons of potential. And again, when you're on such a good defense with good coaching, a good system, good scheme, and just good players, it's just going to make your job easier, and I think that's just going to make Ivan Pace play even better. They have definitely one of the better front sevens in all of football. Now looking at the secondary for... another guy, Kobe King, their 6th-round draft pick linebacker from Penn State. Probably not going to get a ton of reps because you got Blake Cashman, Ivan Pace, and you even have Eric Wilson. So he's probably not going to get a ton of reps his rookie year being a 6th-round pick, but he can be a big physical linebacker. So I like him too coming out of Penn State. Now, going to the DBs. First, the safeties. You have Josh Metellus and Harrison Smith. Josh Metellus, again, this is the reason why I think the Cam Bynum loss isn't that bad. And if you had to choose between Byron Murphy and Cam Bynum, you choose Byron Murphy, which they did. It's because you have Josh Metellus and Harrison Smith. Josh Metellus is probably one of the more versatile players in the entire NFL, if not the most versatile player. He can literally line up anywhere on the field. He can play corner, he can play linebacker, safety, D-line, I think he even played. And he's perfect for Brian Flores' scheme. He had 100-plus tackles last year. He had 8 total turnovers forced over the last 2 seasons. He was great in run defense last year. He was also good in pass coverage. He's one of the better safeties at getting pressure on the quarterback because, again, he can line up anywhere on the field. And he's one of the more versatile players. And he barely missed any tackles last year, and he's only 27 years old. Despite getting drafted in 2020, I feel like if you were drafted in 2020, you wouldn't be 27, but I guess that was 5 years ago, so it kind of makes sense. But he's only 27, so he still can get better, and now he's the starting safety because Cam Bynum's gone. And again, they're still going to use him everywhere on the field. You can't not do that. But without Cam Bynum, he can now be a safety for a lot longer of the seat and play a lot more reps at safety. And next to him, you got Harrison Smith, which despite being 36 years old and drafted in 2012, Harrison Smith is still very good in the run defense. He can still be a solid to good in pass coverage. He had 3 interceptions last year, over 80 tackles. He's still a great and secure tackler as well, doesn't miss a ton. And again, he may not be the player he once was, but he's still very good. Like, just overall, he's still a very good safety, and I think he'll retire a good safety. I don't think he's going to truly regress and be a bad player. I don't know when he's going to retire, but when he does, he's still going to be a good safety when he retires. So him and Metellus are a very good safety duo. Now, the corners is where it gets a little bit, is probably the weak link of this defense. Now, Byron Murphy is not that. He was a Pro Bowler last year, had a very good year in coverage, and also was really good in the run. And again, they paid him a good amount of money. They chose him over Bynum. And again, I think it was the right decision because you have a lot. You have 2 safeties in Metellus and Smith. You don't have a lot of corners. So it was right to pay Murphy, and he is one of the better nickel corners in the league probably. Again, we talked about Isaiah Rodgers and Jeff Okudah, how Jeff Okudah just hasn't really gotten that, despite being, a top 3 pick, I think, when he was when he was drafted from Ohio State to the Lions. Definitely hasn't lived up to that. Isaiah Rodgers, again, he's a fine corner. If Isaiah Rodgers is one of your starting 3 corners, you're not mad at that. He was a good last year, and he should get a lot more reps now that there's really no corners to take spots from him and no other corners on the outside that are better than him. The only corner overall on this team that's better than him is Byron Murphy. So Isaiah Rodgers should play a lot more than he did last year, and I think he'll play good like he did last year. Another guy that I think will easily take Jeff Okudah's spot as that second outside corner next to Isaiah Rodgers is Mekhi Blackmon. He tore his ACL, I think, in training camp last year, or like in the summer last year. But when he was healthy in 2023 as a rookie, he was pretty decent. He was solid that year, in the run and in the pass, and had an interception. I don't even think he played a ton either. But he was their 3rd-round pick 2 years ago, who didn't play last year because of the ACL injury, but fully healthy, and the only guy in front of him is Jeff Okudah. I think Mekhi Blackmon can take that spot as that second corner next to Isaiah Rodgers, and if he can build off what he showed in 2023, and Isaiah Rodgers can build off what he showed in 2024, I don't think it can be as bad of a corner room as it may look going into the season on paper. But again, when you have the front 7 you have, when you have the 2 safeties that you have, it's still going to be a very good defense, and it will still easily be a top 10 defense in the league, and can still, once again, be a top 5 defense in the league. Now, quickly looking at the special teams before we get into the record prediction. Will Reichard in his rookie year, I believe out of Alabama, it was an okay rookie year, had his ups and downs for sure, but again, he's a rookie, he can get better. You're not mad at Will Reichard being your kicker. Ryan Wright is a solid punter, I think he's an above average punter if I'm not mistaken, so not bad there. And then on the returners, you got Ty Chandler, who was an okay returner last year to solid returner last year, so I really like him. Not so sure about Rondale Moore as a punt returner. I don't know how much he's done as a punt returner, but maybe trying to fight for a roster spot, trying to fight for more reps, he might really try and have a good year as a punt returner. But again, I'm not too familiar with how he'll be as a punt returner. And then their backup return man, Silas Bolden. As a UDFA, I think he can be a good returner for them. He's got great speed. He ran a 4.38 40-yard dash. So I think he can give them a little bit in the return game as well, considering because Rondale Moore has probably a good spot on this offense. I don't know about Silas Bolden. So if he wants to make the team and get a lot of reps, he's going to have to do that in the special teams, and I think he actually can have a pretty good impact on that return game. Now, going to the schedule prediction. Before we get into the schedule prediction, if you've enjoyed this video so far, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. It helps the channel out a lot. Now, looking at this schedule, it's a tough schedule. They have the 7th hardest schedule in the league. And obviously, being in the NFC North, first of all, isn't easy. And then they have to play the NFC East, which isn't easy. And then they have to play the NFC North, which also is not easy. And again, I think McCarthy can have a good year. Even if he doesn't have the highest stats, I don't think he's going to be losing the team too many games this season. Now, that being said, I don't know if I don't think they're going to get the craziest amount of wins in year 1 of McCarthy, but I think you'll easily be able to be like, oh yeah, he's the guy going forward. So first of all, looking at their floor, I think they can get 2 games in their division. I would be surprised if they don't win 2 games in their division. It's not going to be easy, but I wouldn't be surprised. So I think for their floor, I think I like them getting 2 games in their division. I think they could beat the Browns. I think they could beat the Giants. And then I think out of Chargers, Seahawks, Falcons, Bengals, and Steelers, I think they can get one of those games. So my floor for the Vikings is 5-12. Now the ceiling, the ceiling is, I think, super high, despite their floor being at 5 wins. Because if McCarthy plays like a guy like Jaden Daniels played or like CJ Stroud played, with how good this team is, if McCarthy plays like Sam Darnold did last year, this team can win 12 plus games. But again, the schedule is difficult. And I do have their ceiling at 11 wins. So, not quite the 14-win season they had last year, because I do think McCarthy will show some of those rookie ups and downs. Missing Jordan Addison in the first 3 games is huge, especially against decent teams like the Bears, Falcons, and Bengals. Because if you want to win a shootout versus the Bengals, you're going to need a guy like Jordan Addison. And if you want to go against the good secondary that the Bears have, you're going to want a receiver like Jordan Addison. So they could go off to a tough start in that regards. So that's why their ceiling is definitely not the 14 wins they had last year and more at an 11-win mark, which leaves their prediction at 8-9 for the Minnesota Vikings in the 2025 season. Let me know what you think the Vikings will do this season record-wise. And also, let me know in the comment section your thoughts on the Vikings overall, what you think they're going to do in the season. So some of your thoughts on this Minnesota team. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. The link to the playlist of all the previews we've done will be in the description. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.